So, getting started. The way my class works, so I record, or I try to record every lecture, and everything that I write as far as notes is going to go into the OneNote. So usually within 24 hours of the class, I have the video for the lesson posted on my Notre Dame. It'll be here in the links, and it'll just be the date. It's probably all I'll write. So you have access to that all the time. The OneNote that has my notes on it, access to it all the time. Anything that I need to distribute to you as far as problems or whatever probably is going to go into the OneNote. The schedule for the week will be in my Notre Dame. I haven't updated anything because I wanted to kind of see what we ended up doing today before I try to figure out the rest of the week. And also on my Notre Dame is a copy of the digital version of our textbook. You're welcome to solely use the digital version. If you would like a physical copy of the textbook, I can issue you a physical copy of the textbook. Does anyone want a physical copy of the textbook? Great. So the second cabinet, not the open one, but the one next to it, has copies of the textbook. If you would like one, please stand up, get a copy of the textbook, bring it up to me, we'll record the number, and then that will be good there. I'd like you to go to My Notre Dame, go to our class page, and we're going to do the sign up for the My AP site for this class. So if you click the link, I think you should be prompted to use this code. I'm assuming that most of us, all of us, I hope, already have a AP account. If you don't, then there's a bunch of extra crapola to fill up. If you already have done this once before, it's just going to add another class to your My AP or whatever. But if it's the first AP you've taken, or maybe if you're new, I don't know what yours login window is going to look like. So you might have an account. Well, I try using your old one, and just use that as the prompt when that code is prompted. I don't know, enough to know how that's going to work out, but should be. Yeah, I'd be surprised if it didn't. I'm not sure. They redesigned the site, so I'm not sure what the login looks like for you guys now or what the prompts are going to look like, but considering we're the best and brightest here sitting in the room, I think we can hopefully figure it out. And again, the code is on my Notre Dame right here. Or here it is big if you need it big. I put this in the content library for OneNote already. I know, it's exciting.
Wait, what's wait. No, that's your dad's. Was it asking for your address? No, it's for better You don't need to do that.
And you call each other friends.
We're gonna drop right
All right. Hi, everyone. Anyone still working on their MyAP stuff? Fantastic. All right. I'm going to spend a few minutes here just kind of talking through the syllabus. I'm not going to go through this in tremendous detail. I'm just going to kind of blaze through and kind of give you the greatest hits. So again, got to have graphing calculator for the course. I think by this point everybody's got one. If you don't have a Texas Instrument version, I'll do my best to help you, but those Casios are sometimes tricky as to get them working or doing it what I want it to do. The other thing to be concerned about is if you have the CAS version of the calculator, will be some restrictions on when you can use that as far as testing goes. So if you have a CAS calculator, if you're not sure if you do or not, it looks like the interface is way different than the standard calculator. You probably know if you do. There'll be some restrictions on like when and how you can use that in test settings. Otherwise, moving on. The way the course is set up, 50% of your grade comes from your test scores, 10% comes from the homework quizzes. We'll talk about what that means in a moment. 25% comes from the homework, and then 15% comes from at least in first semester, the semester exam. Second semester, there is no exam because the course has a AP test at the end of it. In the second semester, you just add 5% to each of the categories to get to 100. So I just split that 15% evenly to everything else. Seeing as this is an AP course, to get your fancy honor certificate at the awards, well, I guess at graduation, it would be for you guys since we're seniors, 90% or higher both semesters. So the homework, typically I'll assign book homework. The book homework is due Sunday at midnight. So you have the entire week to kind of pick away and come back and ask questions. And the idea is that nothing is really due the next day. Almost always you'll have, come on in, grab a seat. You have two choices, so. Okay. You have the whole week to kind of pick away at things. So if there's questions or anything else, we can always hit at the next class before things are due. The exception might be when I assign like practice multiple choice questions or something through the MyAP site. Oftentimes that'll be stuff that we'll do in class, perhaps even as a homework quiz. And those things will be, kind of done right away and they're scored through the MyAP site. Your typical homework would be scored just on completion, not on correctness. So the late homework policy, this is the school's late homework policy, and mine is going to be basically the same with just a couple of minor changes. Seeing as how the homework is due Sunday at midnight, I'm going to ask you to turn that in through your OneNote. When it gets a little bit closer, we'll talk about like what are some of the best ways to do that. There's a technology component in there and not always functioning the way we want it to. So keeping that in mind, the homework, so we have the due date, right? Sunday at midnight. If yours isn't there at Sunday at midnight or the next day, or Monday, I'm not grading anything, getting up at midnight to grade anything. But the next day when I grade it, I'll put in a missing if it's not there visible to me in the OneNote. Now, oftentimes I've done it and I put it in there, but I forgot to sync it or didn't sync correctly, or something is happening and it's not doing what it's supposed to. As long as that's corrected before the next homework check, there's no late penalty. Okay? After the first homework check, if it's still missing when I go to do homework check number 2, the best you can get is 25%. On the next homework check after that, then the next is 50%. So rather than like every week, we're just like, if it's more than one homework check late, then it's 25. If it's more than 2, then it's 50, etc. Does that feel okay to you guys? And again, it feels fair with the technology component in there is like sometimes a booger to get it to do what we want it to. It's like, I thought I did this right at home, and Mr. Kulik couldn't see it, and I don't want to have an argument about it. You just fix it, and like as long as it's before the next homework check, everything is fine. Blah, 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 blah. So the homework quizzes. So typically this will be kind of one of 2 types. So there'll be like a free response style where I give you a question or questions and ask you to work on it. I'll grade those on a 10-point scale just for kind of demonstration of understanding. So it's not like, these things are short. There should be like 5 to 10 minutes and done kind of things. So I'm not going to be looking at like, okay, we made this many, I'm just going to kind of look at it overall. If it's mostly right, if it's all right, it's a 10. If it's mostly right, if it's a 9. If you're on the right track, it's an 8. If you're, like you did something that looked like it made sense, it's a 7. It's not like a hard grading scale there. Again, these are going to be kind of every class, so we don't need to get too crazy here. The second type would be the multiple choice style, where we're going to do them through the MyAP site. The MyAP grades it. Usually I'll have some tiered grading system where if it's like this many right, it's 10. If it's this many right, it between this many and this many, it's a 9, and step down like that. Much in the same way the AP exam is tiered, right? Where like 5 is like, if you get this many right, or 4 is if you have this much right. Same kind of deal. Test, typically there's a chapter test at the conclusion of each unit. If you look at OneNote here, I've already kind of like lined up where the tests are going to be at, like including which sections. Notice they're not at the conclusions of the chapters. These chapters are too much content to wait to do a test. So I have them set up in places where I think it makes sense to pause and have a test. So you'll see that sometimes they wrap between 2 different chapters, or they, or we go and do something out of order, like we've skipped 3.9, and that's going to be in a new test from all the other 3 things. So I've tried to be really upfront and transparent about like what stuff is going to be on the tests in that regard. If you're an extended time kid, again, contact me typically before the assessment for what we need to do for you. The dress code, well, let's take a pause here and talk about rules in general. So we've been asked as a staff to do a better job of enforcing some of the school rules regarding, let's start with cell phones. Probably you've heard this now 4 times today. So the cell phone is out anytime outside of lunchtime. We're supposed to take it. To help you with this, because I know that sometimes impulse control is hard, right? Like you're just used to looking at this thing all the time. I have the cell phone holder up there at the front of the room. Next to it is a class list with a spot assigned for each one of you. If you're somebody that you're like, I can't trust myself not to take this thing out in the middle of class and look at it, you can put it out there so it's out of hand and you can't have access to it, and just help yourself with it. If you feel like you're good to go, you don't have to worry about it, then you can keep it in your pocket or your backpack or whatever. As long as it's out of sight, you're fine. The other pieces would be the dress code pieces. I remember yesterday Miss Anderson came in and asked you guys to wear your lanyards if you still had them from last year. I don't see anybody that managed to do that here on the first day, so maybe try tonight to take a look and see if you still can find it. If you do, please put it on and wear it. It is like a safety and security issue at the school. Once you have them after picture day, I think it's Thursday and Friday, the expectation would be that we're wearing them. And then I would ask you before you leave the classroom to just double check your shirt, make sure your shirts are tucked in and your outerwear is put away. I don't think at fourth hour outerwear is going to be a problem, but you never know. Again, there's other people that really care about enforcing rules and like giving out penalties. I'm a usually like, let's just have a conversation and fix it kind of person, but the cell phone thing we've been asked to be particularly strict on, so you can count on me asking for your cell phone and taking it. Everybody cool? Okay. I just want to be clear as to like what the expectation is so it doesn't feel like it's a moving target, right? The academic dishonesty policy is here. This is the same one from the handbook. You guys are seniors. I expect you've seen this a bunch of times. The expectation is that you're doing your own work, is what it basically comes down to. Now, particularly when it comes to the homework, AI is a really nice or a very tempting resource for mathematics to like, I don't know how to do this. Let's just have the AI crank through this or whatever, find the solution manual. This is an old textbook. Probably find the solution manual if you looked hard enough. You're really hurting yourself. I just want to be clear. Like, I understand wanting to get stuff done and it feels stressful. I'd much rather give you an extension on something and have you do it than you use someone else's or something else's work to finish your homework. If you need to come in and ask questions, come in and ask questions. I'm happy to see you guys. I recognize it's not an easy course. The expectation is pretty high. But mathematics is one of these things where it's more of a, like a run than a sprint. Even if it feels like I'm making no progress and it's wasting a whole lot of time, I promise you it's not. That sometimes the struggle is a necessary part for real lasting understanding, that we're all going to have times, especially in a math course, where it's really have to kind of struggle to get through it, and you'll go back and you'll look, if you did things honestly and like really did rode the struggle yourself, you'll go back a month later and look at the stuff you were struggling with and go, I don't know why this was so hard for me, because it's really easy. You just need time. And some of us, that's one class period, and some of us, that's like a month. And unfortunately, we have to keep moving, but try not to be frustrated. Take your time. Spend your good effort. This is a class that's eminently doable. I will help you as much as I possibly can, but there will be times where maybe this feels very difficult, and that's okay. That's normal. Even if math has been easy your entire life, that's okay. That's pretty normal, as this is in a lot of ways fundamentally different than a lot of things you've done before, and really punishing in that the detail, if you're a little shaky on things that we had done before, can be very punishing, and like getting a correct answer because of like algebra mistakes or trigonometry mistakes or geometry mistakes even. So just as a little pep talk to you guys, like, don't panic, okay? Absences in general, if you're absent, everything we do in class will be on My Notre Dame. The video for the lesson will be there. In the OneNote will be the notes that I gave and the examples I worked through. Will all be there. First place to look. The agenda for the day will be on My Notre Dame, kind of what we're planning on covering. Now that obviously can be subject to change if we come in and everyone's like, last night's homework was a disaster, I have no clue what's going on. Like, can we talk about this some more? Like, like that can happen and things change unexpectedly, but like that's not the first time. I'm sure you've seen that, right? As in all NDP math courses, at the end of the semester, you have the option to take a doubled high test score, retake a chapter test capped at 85% on your retake. We'll deal with that when it gets closer to the end of the semester. I have some other drops that I plan on, like a quiz grade and a homework score. The stuff to be covered, semester 1, we're going to work on chapters 2 through 4. And chapter 2, we're going to cover chapters 5 through 8 and then portions of 9, 10, and 11, depending on time permitting. And then the last page here is just a sign sheet that says that I looked at the syllabus and I showed it to a parental unit. So I'm going to give this to you. If you happen to lose this sheet, you can always print another. It's just the last page of the syllabus, both on My Notre Dame or on the content library. Whoa! So this sheet that we're passing out right now is our very first homework assignment. So just a little 5-point assignment. It's a gimme. Get a grade in the grade book right away. You guys can have this back in a week or so. If you bring it tomorrow, that's fantastic. We were like, yeah, I don't know. Staying with my grandma. My parents were out of town. You get it to me when you get it to me at some point.
Mr. Cook?
Yes, sir.
For the homework,
Yeah.
can do we have to write it on a tablet, write it on paper, and
You can absolutely write on paper and then just take a picture and drop it in. Absolutely can do that. Yeah. Does not have to be written in your OneNote. Again, when it gets a little bit closer to me assigning real homework, we'll definitely talk about the ways in which we can do that. But that's a super fair question and probably something that everybody was thinking.
Yeah.
Some people love to write in OneNote. Some people despise it. Doesn't matter to me how you want to do it. So again, I'm going to try to be as flexible as possible when it comes to that kind of stuff. All right. Okay, what do we got here left? 10 minutes, great. All right, so I want to just talk about a little bit of an outline for the course and kind of what is calculus? What are we going to be doing? Kind of the sequence of events. Maybe a little bit even the differences between what the A, B, and BC course would look like. We don't offer a BC course here. And kind of what, if you're planning on, a college career involving mathematics, either as a major in engineer or something adjacent, what those kind of college calculus courses look like and kind of what concepts they kind of contain. Everybody cool? Okay. So in this course, we're really going to be looking at 3 concepts. Those 3 concepts are limits, the derivative, and the integral. So limits, when I say this word, this should sound familiar, right? In your AP pre-calc class, you described end behaviors using limits, probably, right? Did we use it anywhere else? I'm trying to, again, it's a course new course I haven't taught before. So like, say we have a function that looks like this. Looking at this graph, can anybody identify what type of function this sort of graph belongs to? Again, no penalty for guessing wrong. It's okay. Like, I am a talk out loud, think it through out loud kind of person. Like, yeah. So when you say fraction, I think you mean a rational function, which is exactly the right answer. So typically a rational function like x minus 2 over x plus 5 would have a graph that might look something like this. Does that sound familiar? Classically, you see the horizontal and vertical asymptote in both. It's pretty classic example. So when we talked about end behaviors in your AP pre-calc course, how many end behaviors would a graph like this have, or a function like this have, based on its graph? 4, right? Because the end behaviors are describing what's happening at each arrow. Everybody sounding familiar? So let's say for end behavior A, I've just kind of circled them and labeled them as A, B, C, D, so we have a language to talk about these things without me being like that one or that, like now it has a name. How would I write the end behavior for A? Yes, John, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
As x approaches negative infinity, f of x approaches 0.
Excellent. Everybody feel okay there? Okay. How about B? B is a little trickier. Well, I guess we have to give this a value here. Let's call that spot A, little a. Stay. Anybody want to give a shot there? Yeah, Michael.
As x approaches a, f of x approaches.
Okay. Close. Because what would, if we did the same thing for C, if we wrote C using your same explanation, we'd have x going to the same value but having 2 different y's. That's bad, right? Like we think about function land. There's something a little bit that we need to add to kind of differentiate there. Yeah, Jacob. Yeah, so we put a little superscript on this A saying we're approaching A from the left, the values that are less than A. And this one you'd have a little plus sign in the superscript saying we're approaching A from the right, the values that are bigger than A. Does that make sense, Michael? Sure. So to differentiate that we're talking about this side of f of x, we put a minus sign in the superscript of A saying that we're approaching A from the values of x that are less than A. And this one, we're talking about there, we're talking about approaching A from the values of A that are bigger than A. So we put a plus sign, a superscript on that. So that's how we differentiate something where 2 different y's are happening at the same x value, right? You're getting two different end behaviors at the same x. Does that sound familiar? You guys remember, did we do that last year or no? Maybe, maybe not. Okay. Anyway, good. So far, this has been very productive. Very good. D is our last one. Anybody want to take a stab at D? You guys have done such a great job. Don't let it fall off here. Nate. Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. So we feel relatively okay about writing end behaviors using a limit. What if I say this value here is b? What if I then ask what's the limit as x approaches b of f of x? So this is one of these things that like we haven't talked about, right? We haven't talked about this in your AP pre-calculus course. We don't know, I'm guessing that we haven't even formally defined what we mean by a limit in our AP pre-calculus course. We've just kind of used it to describe these arrows and like, this is the symbology that describes this kind of an arrow or that kind of an arrow or whatever, right? This is going to be our starting point for AP Calculus courses. Like, what do we mean by a limit? How do I take a limit anywhere, just not to describe end behaviors, but what does this limit really mean? How do I do this? And then even more so if I'm not given a graph, but I'm given like a specific function, how do I calculate the limit for a specific value of a specific function? These will be the first foundational things that we'll be talking about. Because this idea of a limit is a core part of the definition for both the operation of a derivative and the operation of an integral. So that's our starting point. Great job today, guys. Good job remembering your end behaviors and how to use limits.